A giant island sits between North America and Europe, covered by ice, surrounded by dark water, and inhabited by fewer people than a small city. From a distance, Greenland looks empty, silent, frozen, almost outside history. But powerful nations do not look at Greenland as empty. They look at its coastline and see the opening gates of the Arctic. They look at its position and see the northern bridge between continents. They look at its ice, its mountains, and its buried rock, and see minerals that could feed the technologies of the future. They look at its skies and see a military corridor, a radar frontier, a warning system at the edge of the polar world. This is why Greenland keeps returning to the center of global attention. Not because it is crowded, not because it is industrialized, not because it already dominates the world economy, but because it sits where several future maps collide: the map of climate change, the map of critical minerals, the map of military surveillance, the map of Arctic routes, and the map of great power competition. The island seems remote only if we look at population. It seems empty only if we look at cities. But if we look at geography, resources, defense, shipping lanes, satellites, and the future of the Arctic, Greenland begins to look like something else entirely. A frozen platform of power. So why do powerful nations want influence over this giant island? What is hidden beneath the ice, around its waters, and above its skies? And why could one of the least populated places on Earth become one of the most strategically important spaces of the 21st century? Before we begin, if you want to understand the hidden forces shaping our world, subscribe to Hidden Power Map. And if this episode helps you see the world differently, leave a like. Greenland appears at first like a place almost outside the normal rhythm of the world. On most maps, it is a vast white shape between North America and Europe, larger than many countries, but with a population smaller than a modest city. Its settlements are scattered along the coast. Its interior is dominated by ice. Its towns are separated by mountains, fjords, water, weather, and distance. There are no highways crossing the island from one end to the other. There is no dense industrial belt, no crowded financial capital, no massive manufacturing zone announcing itself to the world. To many people, Greenland is imagined as empty space, a frozen frontier, a remote territory where the main stories are glaciers, polar landscapes, fishing communities, and climate change. When it appears in the news, it is often through images of melting ice, diplomatic tension, mineral exploration, or sudden interest from powerful governments. The public sees the headline and asks the obvious question: why would anyone compete over a place so cold, so difficult, and so sparsely populated? That question is exactly where the visible story begins to break apart. Because powerful nations do not measure Greenland only by the number of people who live there. They do not look only at its cities, roads, or current economy. They look at its position. They look at what surrounds it. They look at what may be buried beneath its rock. They look at the skies above it, the waters beside it, and the polar routes that may become more important as the Arctic changes. From the outside, Greenland looks like the edge of the world. But from the perspective of strategy, it sits near the center of several maps at once. To the west is North America. To the east is Europe. To the north is the Arctic Ocean. Beyond that are routes, military corridors, radar lines, satellite paths, undersea approaches, and a region where climate change is slowly altering what is reachable, what is profitable, and what is vulnerable. This is why Greenland is not simply a remote island. It is a platform, a northern platform facing the Atlantic, the Arctic, and the space between great powers. It is connected to Denmark through the Kingdom of Denmark, governed by its own self-government institutions, and increasingly aware that its geography gives it influence far beyond its population size. Its political future, its economic choices, and its resources are not local questions only. They are watched by governments, defense planners, mining companies, investors, and international institutions. The contradiction is striking. Greenland has limited infrastructure, extreme weather, high costs, and enormous distances. Building almost anything there is difficult. Mining is expensive. Transport is complicated. Environmental risks are serious. Local consent matters. Sovereignty matters. And yet, despite all of this, interest keeps growing. Why? Because the world is changing in ways that make remote places less remote. Technologies need minerals that are not always found in secure or friendly supply chains. Militaries need eyes in the Arctic and North Atlantic. Shipping companies study routes that once seemed impossible. Governments worry about dependence on rivals. Climate change is exposing both opportunity and danger. And in the middle of this transformation stands Greenland, not empty, not passive, and not merely symbolic, but strategically located at a point where several pressures converge. The visible surface tells us Greenland is a giant island of ice with a small population and a fragile economy. But the hidden story says something deeper. Greenland is valuable because it controls space. It occupies a location that cannot be manufactured, relocated, or replaced. Countries can build factories. They can subsidize industries. They can develop new technologies. But they cannot invent another Greenland between the Arctic, the Atlantic, North America, and Europe. That is why the island attracts attention far beyond what its cities suggest. The true question is not why powerful nations care about a frozen island. The true question is why they would ever ignore it. Because in global power, emptiness can be deceptive. A place may look silent because few people live there. It may look marginal because it has few roads. It may look untouched because ice covers most of the land. But beneath that silence is geography. Around that ice are sea lanes. Above that landscape are military and satellite corridors. Beneath parts of its exposed rock may be minerals that matter to batteries, defense systems, renewable energy, and advanced technology. Greenland is the island that appears empty on the surface, but begins to look crowded when we map the interests around it. The question, then, is not whether Greenland matters. The question is what hidden force makes it matter so much, and why that force is becoming more powerful now. The hidden force behind Greenland is not only what lies beneath its ice. It is the power of Arctic geography at the exact moment when the Arctic is becoming less isolated, more contested, and more connected to the future of global systems. For centuries, the Arctic functioned like a frozen barrier. It was difficult to cross, expensive to operate in, dangerous to navigate, and distant from the main centers of population and industry. Its ice did not make it irrelevant, but it limited what states and companies could do there. The polar region was important for explorers, scientists, military planners, and local communities, but for much of the global public, it remained beyond the visible map of daily life. Now that perception is changing. As the Arctic warms, its physical reality is shifting. Ice conditions are changing. Access to some areas is becoming easier at certain times of year. Governments are studying northern routes with renewed attention. Militaries are watching the region more closely. Companies are evaluating resources that were once dismissed as too remote or too costly. And countries that depend on global trade, energy security, military warning systems, or critical minerals are beginning to see the Arctic not as an empty border, but as an emerging strategic arena. Greenland sits inside this transformation. Its value begins with location. The island occupies a vast space between the Arctic Ocean and the North Atlantic, between Canada and Iceland, between North America and Europe. It is not simply near the Arctic, it is part of the gateway through which Arctic change connects to Atlantic power. Any state that wants to understand the northern approaches to North America, the movement of vessels through polar waters, the security of the North Atlantic, or the future of high-latitude infrastructure, must pay attention to Greenland. This is why Greenland's geography cannot be reduced to distance. Distance from one place can mean proximity to another. From a tropical commercial map, Greenland seems remote. From a military map of the Northern Hemisphere, it is central. From a shipping map of future Arctic routes, it is a coastline facing strategic waters. From a satellite and radar map, it is a high-latitude platform with visibility over a region where early warning and tracking matter enormously. Above Greenland, the sky is strategic. The polar region is not empty air. It is a corridor for satellites, long-range missiles, military aircraft, and surveillance systems. A radar site in this environment is not just a remote installation. It is part of a warning architecture. It helps states see what may be coming over the top of the world, not across the familiar maps people usually imagine. In an age of missiles, space systems, and long-range competition, the shortest path between rivals may run across the Arctic. Around Greenland, the sea is strategic. The island sits near the Greenland-Iceland-United Kingdom gap, one of the most important maritime spaces in the North Atlantic. During periods of tension, this region matters because submarines, naval forces, supply ships, and surveillance assets can move through or monitor it. The North Atlantic is not just ocean, it is a connection between North America and Europe, between military reinforcement and alliance security, between commercial shipping and geopolitical stability. Beneath Greenland's exposed rock, another layer of power appears: minerals. The island has attracted attention for rare earth elements and other critical materials that matter to advanced technology, clean energy systems, defense equipment, electronics, and industrial supply chains. The promise is not that Greenland can instantly replace global suppliers. It cannot. Mining in the Arctic is difficult, expensive, and politically sensitive. Infrastructure is limited. Environmental concerns are real. Local communities have a direct stake in what happens. But the strategic interest exists because the world is trying to reduce risky dependencies in the materials that make modern technology possible. This is the hidden mechanism. Greenland connects three forms of power that are usually discussed separately. Military power, because its location helps monitor the Arctic and North Atlantic. Resource power, because its geology may contain materials needed for the energy transition and advanced industries. Logistical power, because its position could gain importance as Arctic access changes and northern routes receive more attention. A country can have minerals but poor geography. A country can have strategic geography but few resources. A country can have military relevance but little connection to future industrial supply chains. Greenland has all three layers in the same place. That is why it matters. The hidden force is not a secret plot. It is a structural fact. Geography becomes power when the world around it changes. Ice that once made Greenland seem distant now sits inside a region being reshaped by climate, technology, and rivalry. Minerals that once seemed too expensive may become more attractive when supply security becomes a national priority. Military locations that once belonged to Cold War logic become relevant again when great power tension returns. Greenland is valuable because it is not only land, it is position, it is access, it is visibility, it is optionality. It is one of the rare places where the future of the Arctic, the future of defense, and the future of critical materials overlap. And when several future maps overlap on one island, even a place that seems empty can become too important to ignore. Greenland's strategic value does not belong to one actor alone. It sits inside a network of interests, and that network is what makes the island so sensitive. The more valuable Greenland becomes, the more difficult it is to separate its future from the ambitions, fears, and dependencies of others. At the center of this network is Greenland itself. This is not an empty space waiting to be claimed. It is a society with its own people, institutions, identity, and political aspirations. Greenland has self-government and a strong desire to shape its own future. Many Greenlanders see natural resources as a possible path toward greater economic independence. But that path is not simple. Mining may bring jobs, revenue, infrastructure, and bargaining power. It may also bring environmental risks, social pressure, foreign dependence, and decisions that cannot easily be reversed. For Greenland, the question is not only who wants its resources. The deeper question is how to develop without losing control. A mine can create income, but it can also create dependence on foreign capital, foreign technology, and foreign buyers. A port can connect the island to global trade, but it can also pull local communities into geopolitical competition. A military facility can bring security guarantees, but it can also place the island inside the calculations of distant powers. Then there is Denmark. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and that relationship gives Copenhagen a role in defense, foreign affairs, and the broader international position of the island. For Denmark, Greenland is not just territory on a map. It is a pillar of its Arctic identity, and a reason it has a seat at strategic tables far larger than Denmark's size might suggest. Through Greenland, Denmark becomes an Arctic state. Through Greenland, European security reaches into the polar world. Through Greenland, Copenhagen is connected to questions that involve Washington, Brussels, NATO, Moscow, Beijing, and the future of the North Atlantic. But this relationship also contains tension. Greenland's desire for greater autonomy means that every external interest must pass through questions of sovereignty, consent, and political legitimacy. Denmark cannot treat Greenland only as a strategic asset without risking political backlash. Greenland cannot ignore Denmark's role in defense and foreign policy without confronting the practical realities of state capacity, finance, and security. Their relationship is not simply colonial history frozen in place, nor is it a simple path toward separation. It is a living political structure under pressure from global forces. The United States has perhaps the most direct military interest. For Washington, Greenland is part of the northern defense architecture of North America. Its location matters for radar, missile warning, space monitoring, and awareness across the Arctic. The presence of an American military installation in northern Greenland is not an accident of geography. It is the result of a strategic calculation. If threats can come over the polar region, then the ability to detect them early is priceless. This gives Greenland a role in American security that few small societies possess. It is not powerful because it has a large army. It is powerful because its location allows others to see, monitor, and respond. In strategic terms, visibility can be a form of power. A radar site, an airfield, a port, or a communications node can turn remote geography into a military asset. The European Union has a different but connected interest. Europe wants more secure access to critical raw materials, especially as clean energy, electric vehicles, digital infrastructure, and defense industries create new demand for specialized minerals. Greenland's geology attracts attention because Europe does not want the future of its industrial base to depend too heavily on unstable or rival-controlled supply chains. But Europe's interest is also constrained by environmental standards, local politics, investment risks, and the reality that mineral potential is not the same as immediate production. China appears in the network through investment, demand, and the global mineral system. China dominates many stages of critical mineral processing and has shown interest in Arctic research, shipping, and resource opportunities. But Greenland is not simply a stage for Chinese expansion. The more accurate picture is that China's role in global supply chains makes every potential new mineral frontier strategically important to others. Even when Chinese actors are not directly controlling a project, their position in refining and manufacturing shapes how the rest of the world thinks about supply security. Russia is present through geography and military posture. Much of the Arctic coastline belongs to Russia, and the Russian military has long viewed the Arctic as central to its defense. This makes the wider region more sensitive for NATO and North Atlantic security. Greenland's importance rises because it sits on the opposite side of that polar strategic space, close to routes, waters, and air corridors that matter in any period of tension. Private companies, investors, and mining firms form another layer. They are drawn by the promise of minerals, but they also face the hard economics of the Arctic. Remote deposits are not enough. Companies need roads, ports, power, workers, permits, financing, political stability, and long-term buyers. A resource that looks valuable in a geological report may remain underground for decades if the economics do not work. And finally, there are the people most directly affected, Greenlandic communities. They are not background characters in a global contest. They live with the consequences of decisions made about land, water, jobs, culture, and environmental risk. For them, Greenland's rising strategic value can be an opportunity, but also a burden. The world may see a map. They see home. This is why Greenland's power is complicated. Everyone wants something different from the island. Security planners want visibility. Mining firms want deposits. Governments want influence. Investors want access. Allies want stability. Rivals watch for openings. Local communities want dignity, opportunity, and control over their future. Greenland's hidden power comes from this overlap. It is not controlled by one interest, but pulled by many. And the more the Arctic changes, the more those interests tighten around a place that once seemed too remote to matter. Greenland did not become strategic overnight. Its importance was built slowly, through geography, empire, war, technology, and the return of competition in the Arctic. The island's present value cannot be understood only by looking at today's headlines. It has to be traced through the moments when the world changed around it. For centuries, Greenland existed at the edge of European political imagination. Its communities lived in harsh Arctic conditions, connected to the sea, the seasons, and local forms of survival long before global powers treated the island as a strategic asset. European presence, especially through Denmark, gradually tied Greenland to a wider imperial and administrative system. But for much of modern history, Greenland's remoteness limited its role in global affairs. It was important, but not yet central. Then the 20th century changed the map. During World War II, the North Atlantic became a lifeline. Ships, aircraft, weather stations, and naval routes mattered intensely. Control of the Atlantic was not abstract. It shaped the ability to move troops, supplies, fuel, and information. In that context, Greenland's position suddenly looked different. The island was no longer merely a distant Arctic territory. It was part of the northern approach between North America and Europe, a place where weather, bases, and geography could affect war. But the deeper transformation came with the Cold War. When the United States and the Soviet Union became nuclear rivals, the Arctic stopped being a frozen edge and became a strategic corridor. On a flat classroom map, Washington and Moscow seem separated by oceans and continents. On a globe, the polar region reveals something else. The shortest routes between them can run over the top of the world. Suddenly, the high north became a space of missiles, bombers, submarines, radar, and early warning. Greenland's location made it indispensable to this new architecture of fear and detection. A base in the far north was not simply a remote outpost, it was a listening post at the edge of the nuclear age. The installation, long known as Thule, now Pituffik Space Base, became one of the most visible symbols of this logic. Its value came from its position. From northern Greenland, the United States could monitor parts of the polar region, support missile warning, track space objects, and maintain awareness in a zone where minutes could matter. This was the turning point. Greenland's emptiness became useful. Its remoteness, which once seemed like a weakness, became a strategic advantage. There were few cities, vast open spaces, and a location close to the polar approaches. In military planning, that combination could be more valuable than population or industry. Greenland did not need to be economically powerful to matter. It needed to be where the warning line had to be drawn. After the Cold War, the urgency seemed to fade. For a time, many believed the Arctic would become a region of cooperation, science, environmental management, and carefully managed resource development. The language of global politics shifted. The Soviet Union was gone. Military tension in the high north appeared less immediate. The world focused on globalization, trade, and the expansion of supply chains. Greenland remained important, but the intensity around it seemed lower. Yet beneath the surface, new pressures were forming. One pressure was climate change. As Arctic ice conditions changed, the region became more visible to governments, companies, and militaries. The Arctic was not suddenly open like an ordinary ocean, and it remains dangerous, dark, icy, and expensive. But the direction of change was enough to alter strategic imagination. Routes that were once treated as remote possibilities began to receive more attention. Coastlines, ports, search and rescue capacity, environmental protection, and maritime awareness became more important. A changing Arctic made Greenland harder to ignore. Another pressure was technology. The world began building an economy dependent on batteries, wind turbines, electric vehicles, advanced electronics, precision weapons, satellites, and data infrastructure. These systems require specialized materials. Rare earths and other critical minerals moved from obscure industrial inputs to strategic concerns. Countries realized that the supply chains behind modern technology were often concentrated, fragile, and geopolitically exposed. Greenland's mineral potential, once interesting mainly to geologists and investors, became part of a larger debate about national security and industrial sovereignty. A third pressure was the return of great power rivalry. Russia rebuilt and modernized parts of its Arctic military presence. China expanded its polar research and commercial ambitions, calling itself a near-Arctic state, and showing interest in Arctic routes and resources. NATO countries began looking again at northern defense, undersea activity, maritime choke points, and the security of the North Atlantic. In this environment, Greenland's location became more important not because it had changed, but because the world around it had. At the same time, Greenland's own political evolution changed the equation. The island gained greater self-government, and its people increasingly debated the long-term path toward greater autonomy or possible independence. That political question is inseparable from economics. A society seeking more control over its future needs revenue, infrastructure, and options. Minerals, airports, ports, tourism, fishing, and international partnerships all become part of the discussion. But every option comes with trade-offs, and every major project can attract outside pressure. So the strategic turning point was not one single event, it was a convergence. The Cold War proved that Greenland's location could be militarily vital. Climate change made the Arctic more central to future planning. Critical minerals made Greenland's geology more interesting. Great power competition made northern access and surveillance more urgent. Greenlandic self-government made local consent and sovereignty impossible to ignore. This is how a frozen island became a pressure point of the 21st century. Not because it moved closer to the world, but because the world moved closer to it. Greenland's strategic importance may seem distant from ordinary life. It may sound like a story for diplomats, admirals, mining executives, and Arctic specialists, but the forces converging on Greenland do not stay in Greenland. They connect to the prices people pay, the technologies they use, the security systems they depend on, and the supply chains that quietly support modern life. The first impact is technological. The world is trying to build more batteries, more electric vehicles, more wind turbines, more advanced electronics, more satellites, more sensors, and more defense systems. These products do not appear from nowhere. They depend on minerals, refining capacity, shipping routes, energy, financing, and political stability. When the supply of critical materials is concentrated in a few countries or controlled by a small number of companies, the entire system becomes vulnerable. A diplomatic dispute, export restriction, war, mine closure, environmental accident, or transport disruption can ripple through industries far from the original source. This is why Greenland's mineral potential matters even before it becomes large-scale production. It represents possibility. For governments, a possible new source of critical minerals can become a strategic option. For companies, it can become a future supply contract. For investors, it can become a long-term bet. For Greenland, it can become a path toward revenue and bargaining power. But for ordinary people, the connection is more indirect and more important than it seems. The stability of mineral supply affects the cost and availability of the technologies that define daily life. A phone, a car, a medical device, a power grid, a military radar, or a renewable energy system is not just a finished product. It is the final visible layer of a hidden chain. Somewhere behind it are mines, ports, ships, refineries, factories, patents, contracts, and political agreements. If one part of that chain becomes insecure, the final product can become more expensive, delayed, or dependent on rivals. Greenland matters because it sits near the beginning of several possible chains. The second impact is military and security related. Most people never think about missile warning systems, space tracking, Arctic surveillance, or North Atlantic maritime routes. But these systems are part of the invisible architecture that allows countries to feel secure enough to trade, communicate, invest, and move goods across oceans. Greenland's location helps support awareness in a region where uncertainty can be dangerous. In a crisis, knowing what is moving through the Arctic, what is flying above it, or what is happening near the North Atlantic can shape decisions made in minutes. This does not mean Greenland is destined to become a battlefield. It means its location matters because modern security depends on early information. A radar station, a communications link, an airfield, or a port can change how quickly a country sees a threat, supports an ally, or protects a sea route. The real power is not always in weapons themselves. Sometimes it is in the ability to detect, track, and understand movement before others do. The third impact is logistical. The Arctic is not about to replace the world's main shipping routes overnight. It remains dangerous, seasonal, politically complex, and environmentally fragile. But even limited changes in Arctic accessibility can influence planning. Shipping companies, insurers, navies, coast guards, port authorities, and governments all study possibilities before they become routine. A route does not need to dominate global trade to become strategically relevant. It only needs to change calculations. If Arctic routes become more usable during certain seasons, the importance of northern infrastructure will rise. Ports, search and rescue bases, satellite communication, icebreakers, weather forecasting, environmental monitoring, and maritime rules will matter more. Greenland, with its enormous coastline and position near the North Atlantic, becomes part of that conversation. Not because it can immediately become a global logistics hub, but because its geography touches the future of northern mobility. The fourth impact is economic and local. For Greenlanders, global attention can bring opportunities: investment, jobs, airports, ports, energy projects, mining income, tourism, and greater bargaining power. These could help reduce dependence on external financial support and strengthen the island's ability to shape its future. But the same attention can also bring risks. Large projects can strain small communities. Mining can affect landscapes, water, wildlife, and traditional ways of life. Foreign capital can create dependence. Fast development can widen inequality or produce decisions that benefit outsiders more than residents. This is the human dimension often missing from strategic maps. What looks like a resource deposit to a mining company may be a hunting area, a local ecosystem, or a cultural landscape to a community. What looks like an airfield to a defense planner may also be a symbol of outside pressure. What looks like economic opportunity to investors may feel like a difficult trade-off to the people who live there. Greenland's future will therefore not be decided only by what powerful nations want. It will also depend on what Greenlanders accept, reject, negotiate, and demand. That matters because legitimacy is part of power. A project that ignores local consent may become politically unstable. A military arrangement that disregards public trust may create resistance. A mining plan that promises wealth but damages the environment may lose support. The final impact is global stability. Greenland shows how local geography can become connected to global systems. A remote island can influence defense planning. A mineral deposit can affect supply chains. A melting region can reshape shipping calculations. A small population can hold political authority over territory that major powers consider strategically vital. This is the hidden architecture of the modern world. Power is not always where the people are. Sometimes power is where the routes pass, where the sensors watch, where the minerals lie, and where the future becomes possible. So when powerful nations look at Greenland, they are not only looking at ice, they are looking at the cost of technology, the security of alliances, the independence of supply chains, the future of the Arctic, and the balance of influence in a region that is becoming harder to ignore. For ordinary people, that may seem far away, but the systems connected to Greenland are already part of daily life. They are inside phones, vehicles, satellites, defense networks, energy systems, and prices. Greenland matters because the modern world depends on things most people never see, and some of those things may be hidden in, around, and above a giant island at the top of the planet. Before we continue, if you want to understand the hidden forces shaping our world, subscribe to Hidden Power Map. And if this episode helps you see the world differently, leave a like. Greenland forces us to rethink what power looks like. It does not look like the usual image of power: crowded capitals, financial districts, giant factories, massive armies, or highways filled with trade. It looks like ice, distance, silence, exposed rock, scattered towns, deep fjords, and a coastline facing some of the most important waters of the Northern Hemisphere. That is what makes the island so easy to underestimate. From the surface, Greenland seems distant from the machinery of the world, but the deeper map tells a different story. Its value is not measured only by what it produces today. It is measured by what it touches: the Arctic, the North Atlantic, North America, Europe, military warning systems, satellite corridors, critical minerals, future shipping calculations, and the politics of sovereignty in a changing polar region. The opening question was simple: why do powerful nations want influence over this giant island? The answer is that Greenland sits at the intersection of several forms of power that are becoming more important at the same time. It is a military platform because its location helps monitor the Arctic and the northern approaches to North America and Europe. It is a mineral frontier because its geology may contain materials needed for advanced technology, renewable energy, and defense industries. It is a climate frontier because the Arctic is changing faster than the political systems built around it. It is a logistical frontier because northern routes, even if limited and difficult, are now part of long-term strategic planning. And it is a sovereignty frontier because the people of Greenland must decide how to use this rising attention without losing control over their own future. The hidden force, then, is not one mine, one base, one government, or one shipping lane. The hidden force is Arctic geography becoming strategic power. For a long time, Greenland's remoteness made it seem peripheral. But in the 21st century, remoteness can become leverage. The same ice that once made access difficult now marks a region where climate, technology, security, and resources collide. The same small population that made the island look politically quiet now gives extraordinary importance to decisions made by Greenlanders about land, investment, mining, partnerships, and independence. The same location that once seemed like the edge of the map now appears, on a globe, as a northern bridge between major centers of power. This is why Greenland cannot be understood as an empty island. It is not empty to the communities that live there. It is not empty to the military systems watching the polar sky. It is not empty to companies searching for critical minerals. It is not empty to governments trying to reduce dependence on fragile supply chains. It is not empty to strategists who see the Arctic becoming more contested, more accessible, and more valuable. But Greenland's importance also reveals a deeper truth about global power. The places that shape the world are not always the places that dominate the news. Sometimes power hides in a canal, a cable, a port, a mine, a satellite station, a refinery, a shipping lane, or a frozen island where the future is quietly being negotiated. And that future is not guaranteed. Mineral wealth can remain underground. Arctic routes can remain dangerous and limited. Military attention can bring protection, but also pressure. Foreign investment can bring opportunity, but also dependence. Greater autonomy can bring dignity and control. but also difficult economic choices. Greenland's strategic value is real, but it is not simple. It is a map of possibilities, risks, ambitions, and trade-offs. That is why the most important question is not only what powerful nations want from Greenland, it is what Greenland wants for itself. Because if the island becomes more central to the world, the struggle will not be only over resources or bases, it will be over who defines value. Is Greenland valuable because of what others can extract from it? Because of where others can place their sensors and infrastructure? Because of the routes and minerals around it? Or because its people can use geography to build a future on their own terms? Greenland appears empty because we are trained to see power in population, industry, and visible wealth. But powerful nations see something else. They see position, they see access, they see warning time, they see supply chains. They see a northern map that is being redrawn, and once we see that map, the island no longer looks empty. It looks like one of the quiet pressure points of the century. If a place with so few people can matter so much, how much of global power is hidden in locations we rarely notice? If the Arctic is becoming a new arena of strategy, who will write its rules? And when powerful nations look at Greenland, will they see a territory to influence, or a people with the right to decide what power means on their own island?